Second economic indicator we will cover is GDP. So, the full form of GDP is Gross Domestic Product. Well, before we jump and understand what are the different way of calculating GDP and how GDP is measured and what is the implication of GDP numbers on economy, let's understand or recap the previous things which I kept on saying that the stock market is at the end of the day about doing different kind of businesses. And when you do business, what exactly you do? You sell your product, right? You manufacture something and then you sell it. So you have certain manufacturing cost, and on the basis of that you add a profit of it, profit over it, and you sell it. Is that it? No. You can also give your services. So there are many businesses, like if we talk about the example of IT company, do they produce any product? No. What do? They give services. So they provide IT services. A teacher can provide teaching services. You go to doctor, he give you another service, medical healthcare services. Hospitals, I mean, there are many companies who are listed, and they are listed now, who give healthcare services also, right? So goods and services both can be given in businesses, right? Now what you see that agriculture is a unorganized sector. So right now you don't see companies doing farming or directly involved into farming. So farming is something which I remember 20 years back when I was in college, school, not even 20 years back, 25 years back. So there was a line like, India is a agriculture major country. I mean, 70% of the population is involved into agriculture. We will in next later chapter, when we learn about the Indian economy and explore Indian economy in the next chapter, we'll discuss this in detail. But yes, as you know, agriculture is another thing which you can also do apart from the companies selling product and services. Lot many people can be involved into agriculture also. When we talk about a stock market, and agriculture is not directly a business where in a organized way companies are doing a contract farming kind of a stuff and listed there. Yes, agriculture is something which is not very much related with the stock market at the moment, but in future there might be possible that companies doing contract farming, agriculture as a main business they can come into. So when we talk about the stock market and the relationship of GDP, the only thing which comes into picture as an exception is agriculture. But then agriculture is again very integral part of Indian economy. So unorganized sector plus unorganized sector both comes together and form our Indian economy. And when we talk about GDP, we talk about them together, organized and unorganized sector both. So the example is this. Let's say there are three friends. One who is doing agriculture. Oh, okay, so the idea here is there is a country where you have just three friends. In India, let's say just three friends are there. One of the person is into agriculture, friend A, and he produces lot of agricultural produce, and the cost of that agriculture product comes together as 30 rupees. Then there is friend B who do production of different stuff like cloths, medicine, vehicles, anything which you can think about, utensils. So he does a total production and the cost of the production is 40 rupees. Then there is a guy C. He is himself is a teacher also. He himself is a doctor also, and every other service which can be given through him, he take care of that. And let's say he give 30 rupees worth of service as per the fee which he charges, and it all happened in 2018. So there is a country, India, which have three friends. One does agriculture, another is into production, and another guy is into services, right? And all three guys together are into organized and unorganized both. So someone doing production may have few of the companies listed, some companies not even listed. their share prices are not traded yet. Similarly in the services. So 2018, if I go and sum all these three numbers, what comes? 100. Well, this 100 rupee was the GDP in 2018, let's say March. Okay, because 30 rupees worth of agriculture produce have been produced, 40 rupees worth of production have been done, and 30 rupees worth of services has been given. Obviously the pricing will be as per the product and the services they are manufacturing. So the GDP is 100 rupees. Let's say after 1 year, in 2019 March, the same guy produces, and the cost of the agriculture produce is now 36 rupees, whatever he produced. Okay, then the guy who do, whatever he basically got from the agriculture, the guy who did production, he got 48 rupees, right? So just for the taking ease in the example, I have increased it by 20%. So 36, 48, and he has given services worth of 36 rupees. Well, what is the GDP in March 2019? So March 2019 will be the GDP of the sum of 36, 48, 36, 120 rupees. What it will be called? It will be called nominal GDP, right? So even this you could have called nominal GDP only. Till now, since we are discussing about GDP, let's call both of them as nominal GDP. Now what do you see here? GDP in 2018 March was 100 rupees and GDP in 2019 is 120 rupees. But when you hear news, you see the news as the GDP is 5, 6. Well, that is the increment rate of the GDP which we talk about, which the number most of the people are interested into. So let's say, let's go to Google. Let me show you this. India GDP growth rate 2019. Now what you can see, 4.5% is the gross domestic product growth rate of India. Well, it's saying that it's false too, we'll come to that, right? But 4.5 is the last quarter 2 of 2019-20 GDP which has came, right? Now this is the third quarter. Moving on, third quarter is completed, we are into fourth quarter now. So they have published it for the second quarter. Third quarter just ended by end of December. So very soon we will get the GDP number of even January, when from October to December quarter, when today this is 2nd January when I'm recording this video. So maybe in few days we will get even for the third quarter, but this is for the second quarter and the rate is 4.5. You can always go and check like India GDP growth rate 2019. So you have to go and check this kind of number, right? Now what we saw here is that we calculated GDP and we saw that the GDP growth rate is basically 20%, because from 100 you have jumped to 120, right? Now let's understand it in detail. So, but do you think that there is only one reason that why it has jumped from 30 to 36, and the reason is he produced more goods, or there is some other reason? And same in the case of others, was the only reason that 20% more production was done and that's why it became 40 to 48? No, as we all know, there is something called inflation, right? We learned in the previous class also about the inflation, right? So consumer price index which we were learning about, that was nothing but the inflation only, right? So let's say the inflation was 12%. So whole agriculture produce and production and services, they all being increased by 12%. So if the inflation itself is 12%, it means that the GDP has increased 12% because of the inflation, right? So what is the actual growth rate? So actual growth rate is actually 8%, right? So we get the numbers in the news of GDP as actual GDP percentage growth rate. So this is the actual percentage growth rate of the GDP, what you have to be worried about, or which you need to basically check, or this is what you understand when you see a number flashed on the screen that GDP of India last quarter was 4.5%, means in actual, after after removing the inflation part, whatever the economy grew by in all the sectors together, you know, with whatever the ratio they have been given. So ratio is again given by, there have been so many things in the background. If we cannot take that into a small class of GDP because it's a stock market class, but if you go and search in Google, you will get to know that there is a big mechanism behind, how they are taking into consideration that which of the which of the which of this, I mean, when we talk about production, we cannot go in every house and check that how much one person has produced. So there are referential points which used to be taken care of. Certain sampling has to be done. So on that sampling, so for example, let's say in GDP calculation 20 years back, maybe the telephone line manufacturing or telephone line related services would be taken into consideration. But how many people have telephone lines now? Nobody, right? I mean, very few people have the landline. What is it is shifted to? It is shifted to mobiles now. So now the sampling will become mobile and not the telephone. So similarly, there are different kind of sampling mechanism which bought into when we are creating an index, and that's what happened. That they calculate how much it increased by in agriculture sector, how much it increased by in production, and how much it increased in services, and then what kind of weightage has to be given into them, and before that the sampling has done. So after inflation, whatever is the total growth which has happened, so the better way we can say that how much we sold at is not important. If we grew 100 kg of rice last year, what is more important that we understand that we have actually grown 108 kg of rice, because at the end of the day, this is what is important, that how much we are growing. It is not important that, just because of the inflation our GDP has increased. So that's why this nominal and actual GDP comes into the picture. So the number which you get is actually the actual growth in the GDP. And India as a country, since it's a growing economy, every year, we have so much thing to do yet. And that's why you hardly see that India is having a negative growth rate. It may fall down. So last to last quarter, it maybe the growth rate is 6%, and this quarter the growth rate is 4.5%. But it will be always positive. At least this is what I have seen in the data of last 15-20 years. That growth rate of India has been always positive. Sometime we were even growing at 7%, 7.5%. And I mean, this become a very political statement because most of the parties, you will always hear talking about this, that we have a fall in the GDP, and we were doing really well on the GDP front some time back. But yes, it is important actually. Your whole, if you think that you have to make money in the stock market, you have to grow. Your economy has to grow. Only when your economy will grow, your businesses will grow, right? So both of them are very much onto each other. But then the point again which I'm trying to tell here, or what I would like to emphasize here, is that you do not have to look at things at standalone. You have to see many other factors. Just because GDP has fallen by certain number, this doesn't mean that market will 100% follow. There could be many reasons behind it, many reasons behind it. But yes, something which you must watch according to me is like growth rate and inflation both have to be very much balanced. The moment you see that growth rate is increasing and inflation is also increasing at a very high rate, this is one thing which you always have to uh, see, that this is a red flag. That's why I have probably written it here in red color. So these two things you can watch together, the inflation CPI and then the GDP. And once you find them that both of them are increasing at a high rate, consider that something wrong is going to happen for sure. you know and because that time a lot of rate cuts and other thing will happen. And just because the rate, I mean, this portion we'll learn later, like the rate cut impacts on the economy. So when you hear that inflation is going very high and GDP is also growing, trust me, this is one time probably RBI will intervene and start increasing the rate of interest rate of, to lending interest rate. That will squeeze out a lot of money from the market, and when it squeeze out the money from the market, liquidity drops, and this is one signal where you have to be very careful about the market fall. Most of the time when I see that there is a rate increment from the RBI, it has impacted market in most of the cases. Just to summarize, gross domestic, the real definition, the gross domestic product is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced in a specific time period, often annually, and you publish it quarter to quarter. All right. So this is all about GDP, and next chapter we will talk about Indian economy, and that time it will be very this GDP as a concept will be very much important. So thank you for watching the lecture on GDP, and after this we'll jump to the next chapter. Thank you.